dive deep into the real-life experiences of navigating through the darkest times and overcoming life's toughest challenges. This video is a testament to the power of perseverance, courage, and strength in the face of adversity. It's a story of immigration, workplace challenges, and personal growth that will inspire and motivate you. In the previous episode, I shared with everyone about my journey in Australia. Today, I want to recount the process of building a product platform for the companies where I am working. During that process, I made some misunderstandings with the departments in the company. As the saying goes, blame yourself before blaming others. Perhaps partly because I lacked tact, gentleness, and flexibility. But a large part of the reason is due to the nature of the project I am implementing. I am rebuilding an entirely new product platform with a new way of operating. This inadvertently creates two consequences. First, it forces some old departments, those who are accustomed to the old way of doing things, to switch to a new way with a lot of new knowledge. Imagine your job collapsing after many years of doing it the old way, and now a newcomer comes along, disrupts everything, and you have to learn many new things. Naturally, these people will react and lose goodwill towards the person implementing the project. The second consequence, after the project is successfully deployed, in short, their work is no longer necessary. Suddenly, they become redundant and only have two choices: either switch to another job or accept being laid off by the company. This is the group that reacts most strongly to my project, or it can be said that they are the group that hates me the most. Naturally, they will deliberately create barriers to hinder the project. At that time, if these problems cannot be overcome, the project will hardly succeed. Therefore, I had to take actions that, from the outside, might seem a bit heavy-handed and not very tactful. But anyway, everything has passed. I share these things again, not to say that I am right or I am wrong, or they are right or they are wrong. I just want to share with everyone that whether right or wrong, the reality at that time was that I inadvertently was in a position where if the project was completed, it was very likely that I could not continue to exist in the company. I promised the company that I would complete the project by all means. On a personal level, at that time, my visa was still guaranteed by the company. If unfortunately there is a problem, and I am suddenly fired from the company, then immediately my situation will fall into difficulty, even more difficult than the problems of the previous episode. Therefore, in the final stage of the project, when it is nearing completion, that is also when I quietly search for another company so that they can continue to guarantee me. The process of finding this company is almost like once again, I have to redo all the similar things that I did in the previous episode. I also have to find a company that meets all the conditions to sponsor me, and they have to agree to guarantee me. Afterwards, I had to work with them to transfer all the sponsorship documents from my current company to the new one. This is the starting point of the story I want to share with everyone today. My job search journey ended at a company in Sydney, which later became one of the companies I was most attached to in Australia. After going through a series of interviews with a senior manager of the company, everything went quite smoothly. The manager and I got along well, and I would report directly to this person. However, until the last minute, after all the procedures were completed and my visa sponsorship documents were being transferred to the new company, in the final meeting, the manager introduced me to another manager. I later found out that this person was interviewed in parallel with me. In that meeting, I was informed that I would work with and report to this new manager, not the manager I had been discussing with throughout the interview process. Here, we can ignore who is at fault. It could be my fault for not checking carefully, or it could be the company's fault for abruptly changing at the last minute. But regardless of whose fault it was, at that time I was unexpectedly put in a dilemma. In the past, whenever I went to work, I always valued the person to whom I would directly report. I was willing to accept a lower salary if I could work with someone who had enough heart and vision. Conversely, no matter how high the salary and benefits, if I had to work with someone I did not respect, I would not accept it. This new manager was someone I knew nothing about until the last minute. Worse yet, in our first meeting that day, I had the feeling that there was something wrong with this person. But because at that time, I almost had no other choice. My paperwork was being processed, and I had also announced my resignation at the old company, so I no longer had enough time to change. Therefore, I had to accept it, hoping that my initial impressions of this new manager were wrong. After that, we started working. The new manager and I would be responsible for building an entirely new department for the company, and I would work and report directly to this person. This person was my direct boss. At that time, there were only 2 of us in the department, and we were responsible for starting to build the department. Immediately, from the first few weeks, it showed that my feelings were correct. This manager, to put it briefly for everyone to easily imagine, was one of the worst managers I have ever worked with in over 20 years of my working life. I am not a person who likes to speak ill of others, but here, I have to describe some things so that everyone can imagine the manager I used to work with. When there were good results, they thought it was thanks to their talent. But when there was a problem, the first thing they did was blame others, especially blaming their subordinates. This is the type of blaming down that I mentioned in previous episodes. If these people were my employees, I would immediately fire them. But in this situation, I was their employee. Our department gradually grew, and more new employees joined. Most people had the same feeling as me about this manager. Some people, after just a few weeks of work, decided to quit to find another job. They didn't have to report directly to this manager, so you can imagine that for someone like me, having to report directly to such a manager, every day going to the company was a heavy day. If it were a normal case, I would have definitely found another job a long time ago. But because my visa status did not allow me to do that. Throughout the work process, after countless arguments about how to handle work, about how to manage and develop the department, the climax was a fiery argument about human resource management. I decided to bring the issue up to higher levels in the company to discuss. This manager, after finding out, reacted very strongly and demanded with the superiors in the company that if they listened to what I said, they would resign. Unfortunately, in this case, the board of directors in the company, for their own reasons, told me to just listen to what that manager asked. That was the first time in my life that I decided to abandon all my working principles up to now, to choose a final solution. I would keep silent. I will not argue anymore. I will work the way that manager wants. I will not argue anymore. All my activities will be decided by that manager. That was the first time I transformed myself into the state of a robot. Because that was what the manager wanted. And then what had to come came. I dare not say that I am talented or anything special, but in the past, the work was still running because I was still struggling to pull it in the right direction. But since I accepted to become a robot, after a short time, everything in the department started to get chaotic. This manager, because their ability is limited, the more they try to put out the fire, the more confused they become. As for me, I almost didn't care anymore. Whatever they want is fine. Whatever they want me to do, I will do exactly that. Some of my actions at that time could be called irresponsible, and frankly, they were not good at all. But at that time, I only cared about one thing, which was to keep my visa safe. I had to prioritize my highest goal at that time, which was to get a permanent visa. Because at that time, my permanent residency application was being prepared, and I could no longer change companies. I had to choose the solution to stay with the company and find the best way to protect myself at that time. This was one of the worst times in my entire immigration journey in Australia. There was a period of time when I almost dared not read the newspaper in my country, because occasionally I saw my friends fighting valiantly in their homeland. Today, I saw my friend's company signing a cooperation agreement with some company. Tomorrow, I see another friend being invested tens of millions of dollars. Meanwhile, every morning I wake up, silently go to the company, work for one of the worst managers I have ever worked with, and do things that most of the time I know are wrong, but still keep silent to do. All of it goes against the values that I have tried to build for myself over a long period of time. There was a period of time when I myself began to doubt my wise decisions. I left behind all the good and favorable things in my country to move to a new country, and finally had to accept working in such an environment. There were times when I had to ask whether the path I chose was right or not. I shared that at that time, I only used a few simple thoughts to pull myself through. First, I told myself that, no matter what, I've made it this far, so I should keep going until I finish the path I've set out. Even if the path I chose is wrong, at least I get a result. It's still better than quitting halfway and not having any path to go to. Second, I told myself that I had to try hard so that the version of me in 5 years, 10 years, after looking back, I would have to thank the version of me at that time. And the truth is that now looking back, I am very grateful to my version of those days for not accepting to give up, so that today I have everything I have. Going back to the story we were talking about, after a long period of ineffective work, then one beautiful morning, I was informed by the company's CEO that the manager had resigned and would quit the company. Later, I learned that the real reason behind it was that they had been fired. In farewell parties at Australian companies, people often talk about the culture of sharing emotions, about the times they have worked together with their colleagues. In that farewell party, I initially intended not to say anything, but then people kept asking me how I would feel when I heard that person quit as someone who worked directly with them. And I answered, I am very happy. My answer might be a bit impolite, but that's exactly my feelings. Therefore, I decided not to lie about my feelings. However, this story has a happy ending. After that manager resigned, the company was able to invite a new manager to replace him. This person was completely the opposite of the old manager. He was one of the best managers I have ever had the opportunity to work with. The new manager and I worked very well together, to the point where we almost didn't need to say much to each other, and in most cases still understood each other's intentions. To this day, the new manager is still one of the managers I respect the most. And we have become close friends. The family of the new manager considers me a relative in their family. When I share today's story, I don't intend to draw a specific lesson. I just share it so that everyone can know more about a real story about what happened to me in my immigration journey in Australia. From my observation, most people who choose the path of immigration have to go through difficult paths. Each person endures in a different way. I was lucky that I got to work in an office environment. But through today's story, everyone also sees that, anyway, we are also going through a strange place, where we lose most of what we have. And we have to use our advantages to compete with the locals. To be able to go all the way, most of us have to try twice, 3 times as hard as the locals. And if you want to surpass them, you have to try maybe 5, 10 times harder. I hope that, through the stories today, it has added a bit of motivation for those who are still having to go their own difficult paths. I also hope that, through my stories, everyone also has a bit more faith that, sometimes, behind the darkest places, will open up the brightest places. The period of time I worked with the old manager is one of the darkest times in my career. But right after that, it opened up for me one of the most beautiful times. I would like to end today's episode here. If you find these contents useful, please share them with your friends and relatives. Thank you for your follow-up and wish you a peaceful day.